Rich. All right, so let me share my screen. Okay. So hi everyone, my name is Dhivya, and in this session I'm going to talk about how to write an introductory paragraph for an expository essay. And this is basically the guidelines to just write how to write one. Many students make the mistake of usually sailing right into answering the essay question in the first paragraph without actually writing the introduction. But as you may have remembered, we talked about in the last session, introductions have a very special function. It's the first paragraph that people read, and it should actually grab the reader's attention. In a few sentences, it should give some background on the main topic, it should explain the issue a little bit, and it should tell the reader what exactly to expect in the rest of the essay. But it only makes up about 5% of the word count, even though it's really important. So you shouldn't be telling a long story. You should be able to give like kind of a brief intro as to what the essay is going to be about. Just to recap from the last session, these are the parts of the introduction or intro. You have the hook, the bridge, and the thesis. And we're going to be kind of discussing from least important to most important out of the three. So we will have to revisit this slide later on in the session to maybe move on to a different one of the three that I listed here. The first step in crafting an introduction or even just writing an essay is to analyze the prompt and create a thesis statement. So we're going to look at an example prompt. And again, if any of you all have questions throughout the session, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. I'll be looking at it and try to answer as many as I can. Okay. Okay. So this is how a typical high school prompt may look. Also for students who are taking the STAR test in Texas, this is how the prompt will look as well. It'll have that read section, the think section, and the writing section. And okay, so let's look at it carefully. It says Weeds Are Flowers Too, Once You Get to Know Them by A.A. Milne. The think section tells you first impressions can sometimes be misleading. Think carefully about the statement. And write an essay explaining the importance of getting to know people before forming an opinion about them. And by the way, for those of you who are wondering why I put that picture, A.A. Milne was the author who actually wrote all the Winnie the Pooh books. Okay, so let's go to the next slide and we will start to break down what exactly they gave us here in this prompt. The most important thing to remember here is that you should never ever use the read section in the prompt in your essay. Nowhere in the essay should there be the quote, "Weeds are flowers too once you get to know them." You probably shouldn't even have A.A. Milne as an example to support your claim. And because of that, you may be asking, okay, then why did they even give us this read section in the first place to look at? And the only purpose of this would be actually to introduce you to what the prompt is actually going to be about. So they're just telling you, they're just kind of leading you into what they're about to ask you. If you're still feeling tempted to somehow use this quote or use this example in your essay, I suggest crossing it out like I did over here. And that would really, really help with that. Okay, so we have the next section, and we call this the think section. Sometimes it might even have the word think and then a colon, like it does for read. You have the read and colon, it might have the think and colon. And this section is helpful for students to help brainstorm ideas if they are stuck by the prompt or they don't really know where to begin. So this section can be kind of helpful to some of the students, but beware, this section can definitely be a trap. Let's look at what it says again. It says, first impressions can sometimes be misleading. Think carefully about this statement. It asks us to just think about these times. But the prompt is telling us to explain the importance of getting to know people before forming an opinion about them. So you see, they're very similar, but they're not exactly the same. So you could see how students may get confused between those two. And many students actually fall into this trap of not really answering the prompt. They look at the think carefully about this statement, and then they go, okay, that's my prompt. So their whole essay ends up, in this case, being about why first impressions can be misleading, instead of the importance of getting to know people before forming an opinion about them. And answering the prompt is the single most important thing that you have to do in the entire essay. If the student does not answer the prompt, they may not even get credit for writing the essay. So you would get either 0 or one of the lowest scores possible. So again, if you believe that in the stress and the panic of trying to write an essay for either some standardized tests like the STAR test or just timed writing at your school, and in that time limit you think that you might forget what exactly you're supposed to be answering, I suggest crossing it out as well if it helps you, just like right here. Okay, now finally we have gotten rid of all the distractions. We don't have the read section anymore, we don't have the think section, and now only the writing section is left. And it starts with write an essay explaining the importance of getting to know people before forming an opinion about them, which is the prompt that we need to answer. So we kind of narrowed down everything to what we actually need. Okay, so now let's look at how exactly we would, go about answering the prompt. So the first step is, of course, reading the prompt, which we have just done, and I will briefly go back to it. So here's that prompt right here. Now, next slide. And now we need to find a way to make this prompt into a question. And every prompt, no matter what type of expository prompt is, whether it's super short, like explain the importance of a certain trait, or it's really long like this one, it can always be made into that question. So always remember that. And then the third step, reword the prompt, actually rewording the prompt into a question. You can create this by trying to figure out what the prompt is asking. And the way that we would make this prompt into a question would be, why is it important to get to know a person before forming an opinion? Write this question at the top of your paper so you can look at it whenever you're writing your essay during the whole 1 hour, 45 minutes, however long you have, so that you can always keep on looking at it to make sure that you're staying on track. Finally, the fourth step is answering the question, which is what your thesis actually is. Okay. A thesis is, like I said, the answer to your prompt, and the formula for your thesis is the one that's shown over here. It's your claim plus the word because, then your 2 reasons. Now, at this point, I can answer the question of why you have to write the thesis statement first. As you can see here, it includes 2 reasons, and those 2 reasons, reason 1 and reason 2, highlighted in different shades of orange, as you see in the slide here, are what your body paragraphs are going to be about. So that's why it's really important to first craft a thesis so you kind of get the idea for the rest of your essay. So looking back at our example prompt that we were given over here, let's answer the question that we came up with. Question is that right here. So we would start something like, it is important to get to know a person before forming an opinion. Then we add our because statement, and then the 2 reasons. First impressions can be wrong, and new friendships develop. So in the end, the thesis statement would look something like this. You have your claim in blue, it is important to get to know a person before forming an opinion. That magic word because help you with the explanation. And then the reason 1 and reason 2. First impressions can be wrong is your first one, and new friendships develop when people are slow to judge others. Okay. Now that you know how a thesis is supposed to look, let's see what it should have and should not have. First thing a thesis must have is it should actually answer the prompt. And it's not a random idea that may or may not connect to the prompt. And I'm going to keep on mentioning this throughout the session because I think it's very, very important. Every part of your essay must contribute something to answering the prompt or to your thesis. So your thesis statement, all parts of your thesis must contribute something to answering the prompt again. The second thing is to be specific. Avoid being vague. Like we looked at our reasons over here. First impressions can be wrong. So when you say be specific, we're looking for something like it can be incorrect. We're not looking for because judging people is bad or forming an opinion before meeting someone is good. So words like good and bad would indicate that your thesis is going to be vague. So you want to avoid things like that. Even though it's short, it has to have enough explanation to let the reader, or in this case, your teacher, know what exactly it is that you're going to be talking about. And the problem with writing something is bad or something is good as one of your reasons is it's not telling us what exactly is bad. Like, why is it bad to not know a person before forming an opinion? So that's the kind of explanation that we need in our thesis statement. And then the third thing is, can you give examples to support that thesis? Your thesis, the two reasons that you develop for your thesis, they have to be similar, as in they have to fit the prompt, but at the same time, they have to be different enough so you can provide different examples for them. Okay, let's look at what we should not do. I mentioned this in the last session as well. So the first thing we shouldn't do is you do not need words like I think, I believe, or I feel. The reader knows that you wrote it. They know that that's what you think are the reasons for getting to know a person. They know that, what you think is what you wrote on the paper. So you really don't need to add that in. It just makes the paper more wordy, and it seems like you're kind of unsure about what exactly you're writing. Another thing you don't want to do is use inappropriate language and situations. This is a formal paper being scored by people you don't know. And even if it is your teacher, it's a formal essay, it's written on paper, so you don't want to use any type of slang at all. So present yourself in an educated manner by avoiding that slang, like contractions as well. Even though you might use words like can't instead of cannot, and didn't instead of did not. You want to try to avoid those especially when you're writing an essay. So you can't write exactly as you speak. And avoid words such as like as well. We usually use the word like to fill in sentences while we're talking, and you don't want to include that in your essay. And what you're trying to prove is that you're capable of the expected 9th grade level of writing, and you don't want to present yourself as any less. Okay. And if anyone has any questions, I know this is a lot of information. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to put it in the Q&A section. And I will do my best to answer them. Okay. Now let's look at what the because should do. So the point of the because statement is to make your thesis more focused and specific and tell your reader or teacher that you know exactly what you're trying to say. You need to articulate clearly articulate your thoughts really clearly. And the because statement will often times provide a great way to transition into your examples. Okay, so now that you know how to write a thesis statement, we're gonna do an example together. So this is a prompt. Write an essay explaining why Martin Luther King is considered an American hero. That is the prompt we're going to answer, and I'm going to give you a few minutes to answer that question. I'll put a timer for about 7 minutes, And I want everyone to try to write their own thesis statement based on what we learned for this prompt right here. And please submit them in the Q&A section so that I can read them and then we can check them together. Because someone has asked, in what grade do essays start in? So these essays that I'm talking about, this is usually the format for 9th grade essays, 10th, 11th, 12th. So basically almost your entire high school career. So these types of prompts are really important. So I'll give you all about 7 minutes. I put a timer on my phone for 7 minutes to write a thesis statement and submit them. I'll do my own, and then we'll all compare them. I'll read some of yours, and I will explain why it's really good or what we can fix in it. So 7 minutes is starting. And during this time, if anyone has any questions about how to write this thesis statement, you can submit them as well, and I'll answer them during the 7 minutes that we have to write just one sentence, just your thesis statement. And I'll just go back to this slide so you can get an example. Yeah, just submit your thesis in the same place that you submit all your questions in. Okay, I have one person's thesis so far. Remember, we're all here to learn, so I'm just going to look at all of yours and tell you what you did well and what you could improve on. I see a lot of people are using that formula, making the prompt into a question, using because, and then stating the 2 reasons. So that's really good. There's no need to reword the prompt at all. You just would put Martin Luther is considered an American hero because, and then your 2 reasons. Okay, about 2 minutes left to submit some. I have 7 so far. It would be really cool to look at a lot of different thesis statements. So if you're done, go ahead and submit it. Okay. I have 7 so far, and it looks like that's about everybody else that wanted to submit. So for some reason, if you didn't want to submit, I hope you finish writing your thesis statement at home. So let's start going through some of them right now. Okay. The first one says, Martin Luther King Jr. is considered an American hero because of his work during the Civil Rights Movement and his famous I Had a Dream speech. That thesis, very nice. It follows the format of answering the question and then your because, and then your 2 reasons. His work during the Civil Rights Movement and his famous I Had a Dream speech. The only thing I would say is his work during the Civil Rights Movement, that's a fantastic reason. The I Had a Dream speech, he did that during the Civil Rights Movement, so maybe find an example, a reason that's slightly different so they can provide good examples for that. You can say for the Civil Rights Movement, you can say the I Have a Dream speech, but I would say probably for that one, provide a different second reason that's a little bit broader. Okay, let's look at the next one. Martin Luther King Jr. is an American hero because he fought for civil rights for African Americans and led peaceful protests against discrimination and the Jim Crow laws. Okay, so this one is really good as well. I like that he fought for civil rights for African Americans and led peaceful protests against discrimination. I think we can stop that there and just put led peaceful protests against discrimination. Because the Jim Crow laws, that's kind of like adding another reason, and that could be interfering with your evidence a little bit. But again, both really good theses so far. Martin Luther King Jr. is considered an American hero because he has led the civil rights movement and died trying to show that all of us are equal regardless of race. I really, really like the idea that this person presented here. What we could do though to improve this is already really good, but what we could do is we could shorten it a little bit. So instead of saying because he led the civil rights movement and died trying to show that all of us are equal regardless of race, we could say because he was selfless and promoted equality. So that would kind of condense that trying to show all of us are equal regardless of race. So our 2 reasons could be promoting equality and was selfless. Okay. Let's see another one. Okay. someone wrote, Martin Luther King Jr. is considered an American hero because of his active participation in the civil rights movement and ambition to create racial equality. Perfect. This is a perfect thesis. It tells you your two reasons are broad enough to write evidence for, and they're short and condensed. This is a really good thesis. So good job to whoever wrote that one. Martin Luther King is considered an American hero because he drastically changed the lives of people with his speech and stood up against racism without inflicting harm on others. This one is good. I like the vocab, like the drastically, inflicting, all really good vocab, and it really shows me that you know what you're doing, and you're really prepared to be able to write on this. Maybe we might be able to shorten the wording a little bit. We can say drastically change the lives of people, so you can say inspired many maybe, and we can just say stood up against racism, and then we can talk about or stood up against racism non-violently, or we can say protested non-violently as well, in order to shorten that a little bit. But again, another really, really good thesis. Okay. Okay, there's another one that starts, people consider MLK a hero because he fought for human rights, not only that he was the leader for the Afro-American civil rights movement, but also that he organized nonviolent protests for freedom, peace, and equality between Blacks and whites based on his Christian beliefs. Okay, so this one, I would really suggest when you're first beginning to write your thesis, kind of go with this format of he is considered an American hero because. So try to stick with the same format. You don't really need to, get fancy with changing the wording up. Try to use the claim, the because, and then the reason and the reason. Okay, so thank you to everyone who answered. I hope I read yours and I hope my feedback helped. But I think we need to get to the other parts like the hook and the bridge. But thank you again to everyone who submitted. We'll have another activity like this and I can hopefully read more people's. Okay? All right. Okay, so like I said, we just finished the thesis. I saw a lot of really good thesis statements. And I'm telling you, if you continue to write like that in your 9th grade, 10th grade, in high school, you'll be doing good on a lot of your essays. So really good job to all of you. Okay, like I said early in the session, here we are back at this slide to discuss the other two elements. We're now going to talk about the hook and the bridge. Okay. When looking at these other two elements, we have to go by this inverse pyramid that you see here on the screen. The introduction paragraph essentially goes from general to more specific, with the general statement being the hook and the specific statement being the thesis. The purpose of the hook is to grab the reader's attention and at the same time give them a hint as to what the essay exactly is about. So it has to be relevant to the prompt. The mistake that many people make in writing the hook is that they spend way too much time thinking of a good statement to start the essay with. The hook can be a variety of things. It just has to be something that would interest the reader. So don't right away start with the thesis statement that you sent, like that type of, it tells you directly what the essay is about. But the hook can be a little bit more vague, and it's supposed to give an introduction into the essay. There is one catch, however, with writing a rhetorical question, because hooks can be a rhetorical question, they can be like a shocking, impressive fact, they can be a time in history, or they can just be a statistic, like 92% of people, blah, 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 blah. So it can be a statistic like that, but your hook needs to be true. Just because it's supposed to grab the reader's attention, you can't say something untrue. You can't say, I don't know, I can't think of any, but you don't want to say anything that is not true, even for your hook. There is one catch, like I said, to writing a rhetorical question. In order for it to actually grab the reader's attention, it needs to be something that the reader can think about. I know you may be thinking, yeah, I know, but my teacher's, kind of forced to read my paper because she's supposed to grade it. But the more that you draw interest, your hook doesn't entirely decide your grade, but it might help bring your grade up a little bit because the teacher will be more interested in your word choice and what exactly it is that you're writing. So in order to actually grab the attention, the answer to the rhetorical question cannot be super obvious. So going back to that very, very first example prompt, the first one that you saw about weeds can be flowers too, about the first impressions, your question cannot be something like, is it actually important to get to know someone before forming an opinion? Because that's a simple yes or no question. Like, yes, it is obviously very important. Or it can't be, are first impressions good or bad? In general, I've repeated the words good or bad when I was talking about the thesis, and I'm going to repeat it again when we're talking about the hook. The words good and bad, you almost never want to use. Good and bad are like first grade kindergarten words, and we can always do better. There can be a better word that could explain both of these adjectives here. But most importantly, the hook cannot repeat the prompt. But fortunately, there is a solution to the struggle of coming up with a good hook. You may always be used to writing these rhetorical questions, but we have found a solution. Okay, so there are two types of hooks that we could possibly use. First, we have the America hook, where you can talk about the course of America's history or what is going on in America right now. Some starters to do that would be, throughout the course of its history, America, blah, 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 and then continue the rest of your hook. Or historically in America, or in the current state of America, blah, blah, blah. That could also be another starter to that America hook. The next one that we have is the childhood hook, which can begin with something like, in our childhood, we were taught something, something, or children usually, blah, blah, blah. Since childhood, you could use that as well. But be very, very careful not to use the word you or my when you're crafting a hook with the starter. I know I said in our childhood, we were taught. That's okay, and that's the only time we should be used in your entire essay. Only in the hook you can use we, but you should never have you or my or me or I or anything like that. So it can't be, as a child, I was taught, or you probably remember. Yeah, we don't need any of that in our hook statements. After the hook comes your bridge statement, which explains how the opening is relevant to the thesis. And a writer usually uses a bridge statement or an entire bridge sentence to link one idea to another and create a smooth transition between ideas. Essays should maintain a steady flow by bridging ideas for the reader. So essentially, your introduction paragraph should have 3 sentences: the hook, the bridge, and the thesis. Thesis should almost definitely be 1 sentence. In very rare cases, you can possibly have a 2-sentence hook, but I would highly suggest having 1 sentence for each. 1 sentence for a hook, 1 for a bridge, and 1 for a thesis. The bridge statement also builds a foundation of knowledge by slowly adding on to what has already been presented. So you presented that general statement, so now we need a connector before we get to the very specific statement, which is a thesis. And the words that you use in your bridge help tell the teacher or the reader the relationship between the ideas that you want to connect. So you can use words such as consequently, therefore, or accordingly, and they all demonstrate a cause and effect relationship. You can use words such as whereas, although, nevertheless, to show contrast, or furthermore, in addition, and similarly, to help you further expand on an idea. Okay, so now, like I promised earlier, we are going to write an introduction paragraph with the hook and the bridge. For the exact same prompt, write an essay explaining why Martin Luther King is considered an American hero. So I'm going to go ahead and put a timer on for about 10 minutes here, and I'll start it. And just like people did for the thesis statement, please submit your hook and the bridge to the Q&A section so that I can read them and we can go through them together, tell you what to improve, what you did really well. A lot of you did really well on the thesis. But I'm going to give you 10 minutes to write those two sentences, the hook and the bridge. Again, feel free during this time to ask any questions that you have at all. Again, you don't have to wait until the 10 minutes. Whenever you're done, whenever you think you finalized it or finish it, you can send them ahead. Okay, there are about 7 minutes left. I'm just waiting for people to submit their thesis statements. I mean, their hook and bridge so that I can look at them, so that we can all look at them together and I can show you all how to improve it or tell you what you're doing right. And again, don't worry about being wrong. We're all here to learn, and you can only get better. So don't be afraid to submit your statement. I'm also writing my hook and bridge that I will share with you once the time is up. Okay, there are about 5 minutes left. I haven't gotten any hooks or bridges yet. If you need me to clarify anything, just please let me know in the Q&A and I'll answer your question. if you're only able to write the hook or only able to write the bridge, just feel free to send only one as well if you're not really sure how to write the other, and we can work on that together. Thank you. I have one hook, bridge, and thesis so far. And remember, you can use that childhood hook or the America hook. That's always my go-to as well, because they're super simple and easy to use. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just submit what you have, and we'll look at it and work on it together. So we have a little bit less than 2 minutes left. Okay. Okay, got another one. Thank you. Okay. All right. So I have a little. So there's a little less than 1 minute left, and I only have two submissions so far. So hopefully everyone by this time, even if you decided not to submit it, I hope you finish it at home. But let's look at them together, and then I'll read you the one that I wrote. So the first one says, throughout the course of history, America has faced social injustices toxic to American society. Martin Luther King Jr. is one of the most notable activists determined to bring justice in America. Okay, So I really like the first sentence. You started with the America hook. Throughout the course of history, America has faced social injustices toxic to American society. So that's a really good hook statement, and it definitely makes me want to read the essay. The second sentence, Martin Luther King Jr. is one of the most notable activists determined to bring justice in America. That's a good bridge. So now I know that your essay is going to be about Martin Luther King. Okay, now let's look at the thesis. Martin Luther King Jr. is considered an American hero because he set a foundation for civil rights and impacted many people in a nonviolent manner. Perfect. So you have your two reasons. He's considered an American hero, and then because, and then the two reasons. Okay. So I think if you were to use that for an essay, you can exactly copy and paste that introduction right there, and that would be perfect. Okay, let's look at the second one. After the Civil War, the African Americans were freed from slavery, but still had a long way to go. Yes, that's very true, and that is a really good thesis statement as well. Even though they got their citizenship, they were still treated as second-class citizens. Many in the South forced Jim Crow laws onto the population, and many civil rights leaders fought for equal rights. Martin Luther King was one such leader. Okay, that's good. It's little different than the common one sentence for the hook and one sentence for the bridge, but it completely works. You didn't make it super long. It's not a huge story, so that's really good. And yeah, that looks pretty good. Martin Luther King was one such leader. Okay, so you have, and then from there you can just start with Martin Luther King Jr. is considered an American hero because, and you can just continue on from there. Okay, that looks really good. So for both of the people, thank you for submitting it. And I think those are just really good sentences that you can just stick right into your essay. Okay. Oh, I just got another submission. Nice. From 1954 to 1968, America was in social turmoil. The civil rights movement was underway, and prominent figures and powerful speakers supporting the cause made great impacts on the country. One of those powerful speakers was Martin Luther King Jr. Even today, he's considered an American hero because of his powerful, resonating words and his leadership through the civil rights movement. All right? Yeah, that one is perfect. I really like the wording that was used in that one. It talks about turmoil, prominent figures, resonating words, powerful speakers. Those are all really good vocabulary to use. So that's a really good one as well. So thank you for the 3 people that submitted. And hopefully people at home that decided not to submit, hopefully you finished it, and based on these examples, you can kind of see what teachers in high school may be looking for. Okay, so now I'm going to read mine. I wrote, throughout the course of its history, I used the America hook. America has been changed by many heroes. During times of injustice and discrimination were when many heroes arose. Martin Luther King is considered an American hero because he was both selfless and nonviolent. So I have, during the times of injustice and discrimination, there were many heroes. So that's my bridge. And then my actual thesis is he's considered an American hero because he was selfless and his beliefs were nonviolent. So, okay. So now we have tackled the hook, bridge, and thesis. So now hopefully you would be able to write your own introduction paragraph for any type of expository prompt that they throw at you. And just remember one last thing, that your entire essay should support your thesis. Okay. And this is kind of some optional homework, but I really suggest that you do it because it would definitely help you become a better writer and get more practice in general with this whole introduction thing. So I would say to write an introduction paragraph for the prompt, explain the characteristics of a true friend. So here you would give two main characteristics in the thesis, and that would be your two reasons. And does anyone have any questions about, I know this was a lot of information, but does anyone have any questions at all? About anything we did so far? Any of the hooks, the bridge, how to write a thesis, what you need in the thesis, any questions at all? Okay. All right, I don't see any questions that anyone has. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you learned a lot from this session about how to write an introduction. Oh, someone asked, can you go back to the hook and the bridge page? Yeah, sure. Is this a slide that you wanted me to go to, or is it this one? That one? Okay. Did you have a specific question about it, or you just wanted to look at it again? Because all these slides will be on the website for you to look at whenever you want, and so will the recording of the class. Okay, does anyone have any last questions before we close out this session? Okay. All right, I think that is it then. If no one has any more questions, once again, thank you, and I hope you learned a lot from this session. And now I'll just turn it over to Aditi.